Today, I'm going to show you my rendering process and how you can master the art of rendering from it. If your rendering sucks, it's okay, because today I'm going to help you become a master at rendering. So make sure you watch from start to end, because if you skip, you might miss something important. Now, without wasting any time, let's get started. So, the sketch is already finished. Now it's time to move on to rendering. But before that, one thing, I really don't like using a pure white background. It feels too harsh on the eyes and makes everything look a bit uncomfortable. So first, I pick a soft, slightly greenish off-white tone for the background. This helps mute the canvas a little and makes it much easier to look at for a longer time. And here's a very important tip. Always start with the background first. Colors are relative, which means they are affected by the colors and shading around them. So when your background is already set, it becomes much easier to judge your colors accurately and keep everything balanced. Now, I'm doing the basic color blocking for the background. Also, guys, I always color block every element on separate layers, like hair on one layer, face on another, neck, clothes, everything separated. This makes the process much faster and cleaner later on, because once the base colors are set, I can simply use clipping masks to render each part without worrying about colors going outside the lines. It not only keeps things neat, but also saves a lot of time during rendering. And trust me, this small workflow change can make a huge difference in both your speed and final result. Once the base is done, we can finally move on to rendering. So first, I started with an orange tone base color because the overall skin tone in this reference has a slightly warm orange feel to it. Now, the second step is always creating a gradient. Guys, I always add gradients in my art because it's one of the easiest ways to instantly improve your results. It adds variation and breaks the flatness, so your artwork doesn't look like it has just one single color from top to bottom. After that, I start adding blush. I use a stronger red tone around the cheeks and nose area. This area naturally has more redness, so it should always be a bit more saturated compared to the forehead and chin. Next, on the forehead, I add a soft yellowish highlight. This is because the light source is quite strong from above, so naturally, the forehead will catch more light. For the chin, I also increase the brightness, but I shift it slightly towards a cooler tone. Not exactly blue, because colors are relative, but it gives that subtle, cool light feeling. Now here's something very important that beginners often miss. I always add highlights on the maxilla area, which is the region just above the lips. If you observe professional artists, they almost always highlight this area because it helps define the facial structure better. So make sure you don't skip this. Another great place for highlights is under the eyes, near the tear ducts. This is a crucial area that adds depth and realism, so don't miss adding a subtle highlight there as well. Now, in this reference, there's a strong shadow coming from the left side, mainly because of the hair blocking the light. So I'm going to cast a strong shadow on that side to match the lighting conditions. And here's an important tip while adding shadows. When transitioning between the base color and the shadow, always use a slightly more saturated color. This makes your artwork look more vibrant and visually appealing instead of dull or muddy. Great example of this technique can be seen in the works of Sam Does Arts, where saturated transitions make the skin look more lively and warm. I'll also add some subtle shadows on the right side to balance things out. Now for the nose. First, I define the nose bridge to show that it's slightly raised above the rest of the face. Then, I add a deeper shadow below the nose, since the light source is coming from above, which naturally creates a shadow underneath. Now it's time to move on to highlights. You might have noticed that I already added some soft highlights in the beginning. But as we keep building shadows, we start to better understand how the lighting actually behaves in the environment. And now, I feel like the highlights need to be stronger. So I'm going in with a brighter and more intense color. First, I'll add highlights on the forehead, then on the nose bridge, and also on the cheek area where the light is hitting more directly. Now here's a very important mindset shift for digital artists. A lot of people think that once they've added highlights or shadows, they shouldn't touch them again because it might ruin the artwork. But you need to completely drop that mindset. The beauty of digital art is that you can experiment freely. You can try different variations, compare results, and even go back to your previous version anytime. So don't be afraid to adjust things again and again until it feels right. Now, let me share a few very important rendering tips that you must follow. First, don't just work while zoomed in. Always zoom in and zoom out continuously, because sometimes you might render a very detailed eye, but when you zoom out, it doesn't match the proportions of the face at all. Second, keep checking your artwork the way your audience will see it. For example, view it on a phone screen or at a smaller size to make sure everything looks good overall. Third, don't get lost in too many tiny details too early. Focus on the overall form first. And fourth, keep flipping your canvas frequently. This helps you instantly spot mistakes in proportions and symmetry. If you follow just these simple tips, your art can improve and become 20 to 35% faster and better. Now, coming back to the rendering, I also worked on ellipse by placing a darker shadow first, then blending it smoothly. To make the transition look more natural and vibrant, I used a slightly saturated orange tone. For the hair, I didn't overcomplicate it. I rendered it quickly but with intention, and it already gives a pretty decent look. And that's basically how I render skin. If you want, I can make a separate tutorial specifically on hair rendering. Just let me know in the comments. Also, if there's any other topic you want me to cover, tell me quickly. And let me know if this tutorial was helpful for you. If you're interested in more tutorials on eyes, nose, or even game-related art, make sure to follow the channel. Those are coming very soon.